respectfully, we hadn't actually considered offshoring. We didn't even really know of its existence until we came across you guys. And I think for us, it was a big eye opener that we could actually get some staff. So for us, we've just been running without staff because we couldn't fill the roles, and it wasn't a question of remuneration. We would have paid whatever we had to theoretically. So I think the advantages for us organisationally were the time saving to start with. It takes a lot of pressure off reading through the 300 resumes that are irrelevant to the role that you've asked for and dealing with all of that, taking that off the table without having to pay a huge fee for that process as well, because you can do that domestically, but the cost on that is ridiculous and prohibitive. So the Learning Resources Group, we're kind of a reasonably diverse in our product offering in that we service the vet sector, so TAFE, RTOs and some sort of quasi-government stuff. Essentially, we've always provided training and assessment content in the way of learner information and assessment tools and presentations and those types of things across the industrial sector, so mostly heavy equipment, mining, forklift, transport and logistics, cranes, civil construction, all of those types of things. Over the last decade or so, we've moved a little bit more into the software as a service space. So we've always had a team of software developers, and we built our language literacy and numeracy testing platform, LLM Robot, which has got 1,600 odd deployments nationally and tested somewhere just south of a couple of million Australian learners over recent history. So from that perspective, we've kind of got the product side of what we do and then the service side of what we do in a sense. Yeah, from that perspective, that's how we operate. We're not a huge business. We've got 15 staff in total, plus we've got some external contractors we use for content creation, learning content creation, so subject matter experts and those types of things. And then we have some other external people that do a bit of auditing and those kind of on an as-needs basis for us. So yeah, reasonably small team. So we kind of, from a staffing point of view, we need to have people who can wear multiple hats in some cases and some who are reasonably dynamic. So that's kind of the circumstance we find ourselves in organisationally, I guess. Part of the reason, there's a few reasons why we looked at offshoring. Our location, so we're in a regional hub here, so we're not in a major metro. So recruiting talent is always more difficult in a smaller pool to start with. Working in an environment where nationally we've virtually had full employment for close to the last decade, hiring staff is always quite competitive to start with. And especially so, like a couple of the staff we've outsourced have been software developers, have been full stack developers. And so that market, grads are kind of pricing themselves out of the market. We're having to pay enormous money for just graduate students, so people without experience. That's if we could even hire them in the first place. And like from a staffing point of view, we're happy for people to work remotely. We're happy for them to work flexible hours. We're not, we don't have a requirement for them to do anything other than do the tasks we ask of them. So we're really keen to look after staff in that way. But even with that, advertising locally, we just couldn't get anyone with any real level of capability. So for us, it was a biggest factor was, I guess, market competition for staff, getting quality staff. I mean, the bonus that the cost is reduced is an enormous one, but it actually wasn't first and foremost for us in this case, partially because of our location, and I think partially because of the role. It's a really competitive role, and it's difficult to hire for, especially for us. So I think they were the kinds of the initial part of it, and we've just onboarded someone in a marketing role as well, which has been terrific, and we've just ended up with a really terrific young woman who we think is going to be great for us. So I think culturally too, it's been really nice to have these different kind of staff within the organisation. I think it's good for everybody. It's actually getting decent quality staff was actually just unattainable for us, and it wasn't a question of dollars, because we hadn't actually considered offshoring. We didn't even really know of its existence until we came across you guys. And I think for us, it was a big eye opener that we could actually get some staff. So for us, we've just been running without staff because we couldn't fill the roles. And it wasn't a question of remuneration. We would have paid whatever we had to theoretically, not legally, but theoretically we would have paid whatever we had to, but we just couldn't get anyone with the requisite skill set. I think moving into a bigger pool of talent, to be able to recruit from a bigger talent pool, in and of itself, without any of the other benefits, has actually been a really big plus for us. I think the interesting dynamic in all of this is that you have to treat it like a normal recruitment process too, in that not everybody you interview is going to be the perfect person for the role. Not everybody's going to have the requisite skill sets that they think they have. So it's about hiring on character too, as well as all of the other things that you would normally do in a hiring process. I think it's interesting that there'd be people who would sort of just expect that everyone they get's going to be the right person too when they get into the interview process. So I think that's kind of one of the things we've found that's really important to kind of focus on as well. So coming across PeoplePartners was actually from a conference. Hadn't been aware of the existence before that. Hadn't really considered the whole offshoring process either. So not as if we'd kind of gone and Googled how we'd go about it either. So I think, and meeting you guys at conference and talking to you about what you did and how that worked kind of triggered some thought processes for us. So we went away and discussed it internally and we went from there. And I think it's interesting too, like the idea of having someone who looks after all the HR and we know what our costs are, they're fixed, was one of the important things for us. We thought that was a good part of the value proposition. And in some ways, we'd rather pay a little bit more from an administrative point of view to make sure that we know we're not having to deal with that day-to-day stuff as well. So that was another interesting factor for us that we hadn't. It was an unintended benefit that we hadn't kind of factored in the whole process too. I think there's a few different benefits for us. There was certainly the time crunch from a recruitment point of view. So and we've dealt with recruitment agencies onshore before, and it's prohibitively expensive and really time consuming. I think the process for us of being, kind of describing the role to PeoplePartners and then having candidates delivered to us for us to review on video first, which was great. Like seeing them video answers to our questions was really, really helpful. Looking at portfolios and profiles was really good. And then once we got into the interview process, then it was about, meeting the staff, potential staff member and going through that. So I think the advantages for us organisationally were the time saving to start with. And I think, it takes a lot of pressure off, reading through the 300 resumes that are irrelevant to the role that you've asked for. And dealing with all of that, taking that off the table without having to pay a huge fee for that process as well, because you can do that domestically, but the cost on that is ridiculous and prohibitive, and especially for small to medium enterprise, it's really unachievable and it doesn't really add value. So I guess from a process point of view, we found the process really good. Ray and Jam have been terrific and helped us with the whole recruitment part of it, and managing that from an administrative point of view was really helpful. One thing I can't say enough about is the ability to have, submit questions and have them answered on video, because it gives the candidate a chance to actually think about the question. They're not nervous while they're doing it. They can even give it some more depth of thought than they can in the interview process, which I think is actually really valuable. Turnaround time on it was good. So we think the whole kind of process for us worked particularly well, because like everybody, we're time poor. Recruiting is really time consuming and it interrupts the day-to-day of everything else you're doing. So I think having that peace of mind was really helpful. The team are good. Communication's been really good. The volume of emails is good without being over the top, which I'm really pleased about, because you can get too much communication too over stuff that doesn't matter. We've learned, I think, as we've recruited on a second occasion, we've learned a little bit more about how that can fulfill our goals a bit. We've recruited slightly differently for the second round of it, and we've thought about some things that we hadn't considered in the first one, which for us was really good, because I think it's a learning process for everybody too. And I think, if you haven't recruited in this way before, kind of getting a good feel for it. And I think talking to part of the team, like talking to Ray and the team about how we wanted to go about recruiting the second time around was really, really helpful. So I thought that was a really good outcome for us. And I think the interview process too, because we're dealing with people with English as a second language, and making sure that being able to communicate in a really effective way was probably the key part of the interview process for us too, because we got a lot of the technical stuff out of the way in the pre-interview part, which I thought was really helpful. And so then about making sure that you can spend more time on character and fit for the business and fit culturally, and communication was really important to us. So, and we've been really grateful for that. I think that we've got the three staff that we've got are all great communicators and all want to communicate well, and technically are good communicators too. So I think that would be a fear for a lot of organisations, but for us, it's actually been a bit of a non-issue. We've come out of that from a really good perspective. Yeah, so look, I think recruitment in and of itself is a difficult thing. And I think finding a better way to do it at lower cost and with better outcomes is crucial in any business. And I think it doesn't matter whether you're in the education sector or anything, recruitment's a problem for all of us. And I think partnering with someone like PeoplePartners just takes a lot of the pressure off, gives you a really good outcome at a lower cost. And it's, in a lot of ways, it's kind of a no-brainer. You just got to make sure, you do your part of it and you come out with some really good team members. Here in Australia, we've all been hiring the same people over and over again in the same style of people and making do because we don't have that big talent pool to pull from. Whereas if we can go to a country that has a much bigger population and a bigger talent pool, who also have so many predominantly English speakers, it's kind of an untapped wealth of resource for us as organisations. And the fact that we can get it at a lower cost is actually really just the kind of the huge bonus, which would be a driving force for a lot of people, but it's also just a big bonus in a lot of cases as well.